Morning, everyone. Welcome to Teaching Talk number 6, Student Engagement in the Virtual Classroom. My name is Jennifer Reniers, Dr. Jennifer Reniers, and I am an educational developer from the Office of Teaching and Learning, and I'm pleased to welcome you here today. So to begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Guelph resides on the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize that today this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and acknowledging them reminds us of our collective responsibility to the land where we learn and work. So I'm going to briefly pass things over to Sharoz, who's going to give you some information today about the technology and the platform.
Hello, everyone. Like Jennifer Reniers has said, my name is Sharoz. And just a couple things to remember for everyone is that the webinar will be recorded the first 15 to 20 minutes, and it will be made available to you in this coming week. So you don't have to worry about taking notes because everything will be recorded and provided to you. Another thing to note, if you haven't attended one of our teaching talks before, is that you will notice that your audio and video is turned off, and it will remain off for the remainder of the session. So how to ask Q&A is you use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen in the ribbon, because the chat option has been disabled for you. So all you have to do is ask your question in the Q&A box. And as always, please remain respectful when asking questions, and I will hand it off back to Dr. Reniers.
Thank you. So I'm so pleased to welcome Dr. Julie Vale, Dr. Ryan Clemmer from the School of Engineering, and Dr. Nagam Mohammed from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. So we're so lucky today to have Julie, Ryan, and Nagam talking to us about their experience with student engagement in the virtual classroom. So they'll talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have about 25 minutes to half an hour for a Q&A afterwards. So take it away, Julie and Ryan.
Let me just get the presentation going here. All right. Okay, so I'm Dr. Julie Vale, and I'll be speaking with Dr. Ryan Clemmer, and he's going to start our presentation.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Ryan Clemmer, School of Engineering, as mentioned. So today's talk is talking about the challenge of engaging classes in a virtual classroom. So it's difficult at the best of times to keep students engaged in a large class when you're face-to-face. It becomes even more difficult when it's online, particularly when you're missing some of those feedback cues that you get. You know, if everyone's got their heads on the desk sleeping, may be a good time to change things up. But when you're staring at a bunch of blank screens, then it's difficult to see if people are engaged or if they're in fact there. So today's talk will look a little bit about some of our experiences and some ideas that may build some engagement within the classroom. Yeah, next slide. So Julie and I have done some research over the last few years, and in fact, we've got a paper that'll be published in CJ Sodal, should be in the fall. We've just finally submitted the final edits. And so this slide here is a bit of a real quick summary of some of the research that we've done. Julie offered a remote hybrid face-to-face lecture a few years ago. And we did a survey of the students. We looked at their grades, and so we had a combination of some quantitative and qualitative feedback. One of the biggest things that stood out was, if you look to the left here, there's plotting the self-reported GPA and the student's grade. So naturally, there's an expectation that as the student's GPA is higher, that they should achieve a higher grade. One of the things that stood out at this is that for those students that attended more than 75% of the classes, it was self-reported data, they performed better than the students that attended less than 75%. On average, it was about a 12% difference in grade. 75% was a Likert scale that we used in the surveys. It's self-reported, but generally, the nature of the questions, it can be reliable to ask students and their attendance. So Because we had smaller sample sizes, getting statistically significant data was a bit of a challenge, but this was one of the few statistically significant results that really stood out, even with the smaller sample sizes. So the real important thing here is that if students attend class just by showing up, they can do on average 12% better. Now, when we looked at what was the effect of students attending remotely or face-to-face, here is a little bit, so we looked at both groups that attended either primarily face-to-face or primarily remotely, and who attended more than 75% of the classes, so that we had a similar comparison made here. And here is interesting that attending locally was about 7 or 8% difference on average in terms of grade. So there was a slight benefit to attending face-to-face. So that's at least encouragement for us that perhaps it will be better to get back into the classroom and attend and be in front of the class and have that face-to-face experience. But then the interesting thing from this was that despite maybe being at a disadvantage, the fact that students could attend lecture at all, that benefit outweighed the potential negative impacts that they may have had by attending remotely. And the remote, this was a summer, students would have been on jobs and trying to fit in classes over the lunch hour. So there's a lot of mitigating circumstances that may have affected the performance of the remote attenders, whereas those on campus, they could focus in class and maybe have more time to focus on their studies. So we did a qualitative study, and we're looking at what are some of the reasons why students attend lecture. And one of the primary things that came up through all the various questions of what improved their learning, what was some of the reasons why they came to class. And the biggest thing that came out for our study was that students attend class to be able to ask questions and have those questions answered. Because it was a remote delivery, there was a chat feature available. And so this was critically important for the students that were attending remotely, because it gave them an opportunity to ask questions. Interestingly, it also helped some of the students that were attending the lecture physically at face-to-face, because there were some students that felt uncomfortable asking their question, and by providing the chat, that allowed them to ask a question without feeling self-conscious or having that anonymous ability to ask those questions. So for us, the real key finding for attending that class was the ability to ask those questions and have them answered and have that instructor interaction, even if they may not have answered or asked those questions all the time. But all right, so yeah, sorry, Julie, you can go to the next slide.
Okay, so this was the research that Ryan was talking about was from a class that I taught quite a few years ago. So when COVID hit and we had to switch to fully online, I did my best to take my learnings from that research and that experience and apply them to the class that I was teaching. So I was teaching Eng 1500, which is a linear algebra course, approximately 250 students in the class. And so I delivered it in a very similar way to how I delivered that hybrid course in the summer a few years back. So I projected my notes, which I wrote in OneNote on my tablet, live writing. So it's not static slides that I'm just talking over. I did not provide video of myself, but I did provide full audio. And there was live contact and active learning via the chat. So it's been a few years since that summer course, and so technology has gotten a little bit better. So I also thought to myself, how can I bring in some really simple built-in tools that we have available to us now? So I was using Zoom, and I'm going to go through 3 very straightforward Zoom tools that I used to help. We're going to touch on a couple more advanced things later at the end of the talk. So the chat pod was a really crucial thing. So students could type whatever they wanted into the chat pod, and I would respond verbally. So you can see here, these are real questions that were asked during the 1500 chat. I have changed the students' names to retain their privacy, but you can see that they're asking questions like, do you have to write both possible answers? They're thinking forward to exams, or they're asking questions about the actual content that I was talking about that day in lecture. How did you get the diagonalization? So do we just put the eigenvalues on the diagonal? And then you can see the next statement is got it. That's because I've answered verbally, and the student has the opportunity to reply to me in the chat to confirm that they understand. And then the last couple comments are when I actually throw out to the class in the same way that you would do in face-to-face. You say, okay, how would we do this? And then you have to pause. And patience is crucial when you're doing online teaching, because you have to pause for a lot longer than you think you do. And then you wait for the students to write something, for example, in the chat, like this fictional student Anu has done that says multiply by S on both sides. And then I asked for a clarifying thing, and they've said in the front. And so you can have that interaction through the chat pod that you would normally verbally do in the class, just requires a little bit more patience on your part. The other really cool thing that Zoom allows for, so let me backtrack half a second. Pretty much any one of your online tools is going to provide a chat pod tool, and I strongly advise that you use it. Like Ryan pointed out, our earlier research indicated that that was a crucial component to the students' learning. In Zoom, you have these nonverbal reactions. So on the top left here, we have what the presenter or the host will see, and on the bottom right, we have what the participant will see. And so they can click yes, no, raise hand, go slower, go faster. And then you as the presenter, you'll get a little number on top of these things. So in this example, we have a number 1 over the yes. So that means that one participant has clicked yes. So this is a quick and dirty way to do a poll without needing to do a poll. You can call out to your class, is everybody ready to proceed? And then they can click yes and no. It's completely anonymous. And if you have all yeses and no nos, then away you go. And then you can just click clear all to make sure that anytime you ask your next question, you're getting the a clean set of answers, if you wish. They can also give you kudos, thumbs up, thumbs down, etc. And the raise hand feature is really nice, because when you have a large class, what the raise hand will do is it'll pop that individual's name up to the top of your participant list. And they can use that as a way of letting you know that you need to stop or slow down because they're typing something into the chat that they need to ask you this question. So it was really, really valuable, because when you have 250 students, as you're experiencing right now in this webinar, I did not let the students unmute their mic, and I told them to please have their video turned off, just because things can get silly otherwise. So the last thing that I want to mention is this annotate feature, which was great fun to teach with. So it looks like a bit of a mess down in this bottom right corner down here, but so I'm going to show you a little bit of a video so you can see how it happens. So what I would do is I would start by structuring the questions on the left here. And I would say, okay, you know, in this example, we're looking at complex numbers, and I would say A, the natural numbers, B, the integers, C, the rationals, and D, the reals. And then I would throw the question out to the class and say, okay, well, what do these things mean? And then what the students can do is they can annotate directly on the screen, and you can see them doing it here. And they can collectively write down what they think are the answers. So each one of the different colors is a different student happily writing away, providing some answers to us. Again, patience is crucial. This video is actually double time. So this is twice as fast as what it is in real time. But you can certainly just sit there and wait or talk over
this
as
is pretty awesome. I'm loving watching all of this stuff come up here.
Yeah, as people are writing. It's cool. And you also, as the presenter, have the capability of completely cleaning the screen off to stop or undo what the students are doing. And you also have the ability to turn it off if they start getting silly with it. A nice side effect of this is that I had an 1.5-hour lecture. So usually at about the 45-minute mark, I would take a 5-minute break. And I would actually let them use the annotate feature during that break. And they would play games with each other. They would play hangman, they would play word games, they would talk to each other through the annotate. And it was really nice to provide that social interaction for them in the middle of a lecture using this feature. So it was one of these really cool, positive, unintended consequences of a technology tool. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Ryan to talk about some of the accessibility issues that you should really keep in mind when you're deciding what kind of technology tools to use.
One of the main things is because the students could be from anywhere in the world, you just want to be mindful of maybe the requirement of being available during the lecture, the synchronous online lecture. So there's things about time zones. The other is, despite having maybe as the presenter all the best technology, a lot of it is limited to by what the students have. I noticed I've got a summer grad course that I've been teaching, and I've had an older tablet that I've been using to look to see what the students have are seeing. And when I take notes, it lags a fair bit. And so some of those things are out of your control, but it does affect the experience. So things like reliable internet, the technology, the computers, laptops, those kinds of things. There are also maybe privacy issues or family pressures that, if there's lots of kids or anyone, I guess, for that matter, might be in a room that may not have the best places to be able to work. So those are things just to keep in mind, that the students will also have their challenges, and we'll have our challenges as well. So I guess, in terms of some other tools, I was using Zoom for my grad class, and I was also using clickers as well. One of the nice features with Zoom, I'm not sure if some of the others have these as well, but when I was using clickers in a regular classroom, I allow students to talk amongst themselves and primarily answering multiple choice questions. One of the nice things with Zoom is they have breakout rooms. So I have a class of 28 students, and so I would have groups of 4 or 5 students, and I'd allow them to meet within those small breakout rooms so they could have those discussions. So I would just randomly assign students to those rooms. I tried listening into a few of those discussion groups, but when I walked in, then it was I killed all discussion. It's like the parents walking into the room, the kids, and everything goes quiet. So I didn't go into those rooms very often, just because I didn't want to disrupt the discussion. Clickers would take quite a bit longer than what they'd normally in the classroom, because you don't get a sense of how much students, how far along they are in their discussions, because you can only pop into one room at a time. And so when I would maybe do a question in the class, regular classroom, it maybe be a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It took a lot longer with online. It was maybe looking at about 3 minutes, because I was waiting for the responses to go up. And you can close the rooms, and then Zoom gives a 1-minute warning. So I would, after about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, I would close all the rooms. They'd have a minute to finish up the discussion and complete their responses then. And then everyone would be in the main room, and then I would take up the question, discuss it, look at the poll results, and then go on to the next question. Some other things that you can use as well are online collaboration tools like Google Docs, OneDrive, those kinds of things. Of course, you could have discussion sites set up as well to help students engage with one another. But I think the biggest thing for me with this summer experience is that it does take a lot longer than what you may be used to in a regular classroom. So just keep that in mind as you go through your development of your courses. Next slide.
That's it. We're done.
Okay, that's it for Julie and I. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to hand it over to Nagam now.
Okay. Okay, good morning. I'm Nagam, and today I'm gonna continue with how we're gonna engage the students if we have a very large classes. So we're gonna get to the point, okay, I want to engage my students and I want them to follow up my class, my teaching, and also I want to make sure that they understand the materials. And actually, I'm gonna teach online class, either if it is synchronous or asynchronous. How I'm gonna engage these large classes. Let us say it's not just like 100 or 200 or 300, maybe more than that. So how I'm going to engage them and keep them in class and make sure they are following me, not just they left, because now if we're going to teach online, I don't know whether the students actually are still in my class. Are they still listening? Do they feel that the class is interesting and they keep listening, or just they feel it's boring and they left the class? So all these are some of the things that we're gonna face when we're gonna teach online. So one way to engage our students, because if they're gonna engage, they're gonna feel the class is interesting, they're gonna learn the materials. So one way to keep them in a class is actually use a classroom response systems. And the classroom response system, if you're gonna search these days, you're gonna find there are tons of these systems. Which one I'm gonna pick? The popular ones that we have in our universities is actually we have iClicker, we have TopHat. But even with the publishers, many of the book publishers now, they have their own systems. So which one you're gonna pick? Which one is the best for me? Is it iClicker? Is it TopHat? So the point is gonna depend on what are the features that you want or what you want to use inside your class. So for example, I used iClicker for almost 4 years and in Waterloo University. And when I came to Guelph University, I started using TopHat. So with iClicker, if you're gonna start thinking of iClicker, and I run, by the way, 2 studies related to iClicker, one of them as an observational study, and the other one as an experiment related to the experience of the students, the effect of engaging the students inside the class, on their grades, on their learning process. Now, what we got from all these studies, yes, engaging the students in the class, it's gonna help them. It's gonna help them not just learn the materials, it's gonna help them to feel that this class is interesting, and that is gonna affect their grades at the end. So which one you're gonna pick? Am I gonna pick iClicker? Am I gonna pick TopHat? Now with iClicker, I use iClicker remote, and we had some of the issues with that. Some of the issues related to the students gonna forget to bring their iClicker remote to the class. Sometimes the battery off. Sometimes we have an issue. As an instructor, you can find or you can see that some of the students bring another remote for the other students. So these are some of the issues that we had, some of the problems that we had related to using iClicker remote. Then we use also iClicker Cloud, which is not, what is that? It's going to be app. They can download it on their computer. They can download it on their cell phone or iPad, tablet, or whatever. Now that's also help the students not to forget to bring their remotes and all that stuff. When I use TopHat, the features that TopHat is actually has is more than iClicker. Now with the TopHat is actually, you can, specifically now with these days, because we're gonna teach online. Now iClicker with TopHat, you can assign some of the questions to the students if they are in a different time zone. So it's not necessary that you are the same time that you are teaching. You're gonna pop the question, the student's gonna answer the question, whether it is multiple choice, true, false, or whether it is a written question. Now, you can assign these question in a different time zone. So what I mean by that, you can assign the time is different. So it's not necessary while I'm talking, I'm gonna ask the students a question. So that is going to help, which I think this feature is not available with iClicker. So that's why I said, if you're going to try to pick one of these tools, make sure it's going to actually work nicely with the purpose of using them. Now, from my previous two studies, the students actually love using these systems. And the same thing with the Top Hat. When I use it, I'm using it almost 2 years. The students, the feedback from the students, they love it. The most important part about these systems is actually all of them are anonymous. So the students will not feel embarrassed to answer a question if that question was wrong. So they love that feature with this type of systems, and also they love that they actually keep them following the material, so they will be able to answer your questions. Some of the recommendation, if you are looking for using them, is if you're going to have a huge classes, or let us say even multiple sections, make sure that if you are the only one, or even if you have other instructors with you, make sure that you all gonna use the same number of questions in each class. So, for example, if I'm gonna teach a class and I'm gonna give the students 2 questions, the other instructors, they should do something like that too. Try to be consistent, because the students, they can complain later that one of the sections, they are actually giving them more questions, we are less questions. So this is one of the issues that you're gonna face. Now, try to not give them a long answer questions, long calculations. Try to actually give them some concepts question that you know from your experience that the students will have difficulty to understand. So in this situation, you understand and you know whether your students are following you, whether your students understand that concept or not. Now, one of the things that I really recommend is actually giving some points, some marks for these questions, not just for participation. Just for participation, the students will not care to follow up with the materials. So what I've done is actually, I give the students 5%, and do not give them a very a large percentage. No, give them a small percentage, like 5%. And with this 5%, what I've done, I gave them 2 points for each question. So 1 point for just participation and 1 point for the correct answer. Why I've done it this way? I've done it before just for participation, and I noticed when the question is up, the students right away pick any answer. So they don't care whether it is correct or not. But when you're gonna give them 1 point for the correct answer, then the students start thinking and they start following up with the materials, so they can get that one correct. And also, what I've done is actually, I haven't account for all their questions at the end when I calculate the 5%. So what I actually count only 75% of their best answers. And this way you don't want to worry about if one of the students miss one of the classes and miss the clicker. So there's no accommodation for missing some of these clicker questions. And you should be very clear with that at the beginning of the class. So you're gonna tell them, okay, guys, I'm not gonna count for all your clicker questions. I'm gonna count, or for your Top Hat questions, I'm gonna count only for 75%. So if you're gonna miss any of these questions, do not worry. This is gonna be part from the 25 that you're gonna miss. So you don't need to accommodate anything related to missing of these questions. Now, if you're gonna find that the students pick the wrong answer, specifically if you find more than 30% of the students pick the wrong answer, incorrect one, try to give them more explanation why this is the wrong one. Now, also try to explain to them why this is wrong. It's not just tell them, okay, this is wrong and move on. No, try to explain to them why this is the wrong one, why you shouldn't pick that one, and this way they will understand the concepts more. Okay, so for me, now I'm done. Thank you, guys.